Nobody's raising their hand, but you heard a lot. I thought I knew a lot about that program, but I heard a lot that I didn't know. And I suspected the connection between UFOs and Moby Dick. Now we just had it confirmed. Okay, we've got Colonel Craig down there. We have one question here. You want me to go ahead and ask her? Okay. Colonel Craig, you, I guess in the short introduction that we gave, we didn't really indicate how long and how extensively you were connected with space situational awareness. So I will tell you, he started a Moonwatch program on the eve of the Sputnik launches down in New Mexico. That's really where it began, I think. And then he moved on to set up the space surveillance software as we were about to go into Cheyenne Mountain in the 1960s. And went from there to help design, maybe lead, the Space Defense Operations Center, the SPADOC, which we're now, of course, replacing with JMS. And he finished his career in uniform with leading the design of what we call the High Accuracy Catalog. So, Colonel Craig, could you just tell us a little bit about, maybe discuss the evolution of your role in space surveillance, maybe starting with SPADOC and how that all came about?
First, I would like to give a trophy to Colonel Haig. He didn't mention it, but he was involved briefly with the MOL program. That preceded Skylab, that preceded the shuttle. Air Force program that was canceled, I would say primarily for political reasons back in the late 1960s. And I had, coming on board with the NRO, I had the first job of joining Colonel Ralph Ford in disposing of the MOL, what was left of it. And it took a while. NASA wasn't too cooperative. They wanted to give some of it to NASA. They didn't know what for. And now they know what for, but it's too late. I was going through my stuff the other day, and I found what may be the last remnant of MOL, which I'll now give to Colonel Haig, if I can get over there. Pass that over there. I refused to get rid of that. That was, we had a scale model, 1/30th scale, and that was the label on it, brass label. So I don't know if there's any other piece of the MOL around. But since Colonel Haig was involved with it, I thought he might like that.
If I could just read what it says, because he can't quite read it. Is that right, sir? Would you like me to read it?
Yeah.
Okay, it is a very nice brass plate. It says USAF Manned Orbiting Laboratory Mission Module, produced by the GEMOL program. And I don't know if everyone knows what that program was, but it was a huge effort by the Air Force, but then suddenly got canceled. It was a manned orbiting laboratory that only hired astronauts whose vision was 20/10 or better. Does that make any sense? Think about it.
And if some of you aren't aware of this, the Manned Orbiting Laboratory papers, the NRO and Air Force recently released several tens of thousands of those. They're available on the NRO website.
Could I explain a little about MOL? When I left the Air Force, I took a job with GE, who is the contractor for MOL, as the manager of simulation and astronaut training. So that simulator that I guess this came from was a monster. It was 5 years old when I joined the program, and it was about many years from completion, believe me, and was well over budget. The purpose of the program, of course, was to do manned reconnaissance from a satellite. And if you think about that for a little while, it doesn't make much sense. It was an Air Force program which was actually to compete with the NRO program, which were doing a very good job by then in providing excellent reconnaissance coverage. But the Air Force typically wanted to put a man in space. So they proceeded with MAL until it just was obvious it was an impractical thing to do, so they scrubbed it. The simulator, well, trying to make a program like that at that time, the technology simply wasn't advanced enough to do it. The simulator required 2 separate computer systems, each one made up of, at that time, the hottest digital computer that IBM could come up with, and the other half of it being a Burroughs analog computer. The analog computer is connected to the simulator itself, and then is connected to the digital computer for instructions and jargon. But the analog computer was used because its response time was much faster than the digital computer at that time. While writing the software for a system like that, we had 280 programmers and engineers, well, 280 programmers and about 50 engineers trying to design that system and make it work. And they were already 3 years behind schedule and several $1 million over budget when the program was canceled. There were 2 such satellite systems, one representing the simulated world and the other one representing the real world. And to find problems, you measure the difference between the 2 worlds. It's a great theory, very complicated simulator, never worked.
Okay,
Can I make one comment relative to the Air Force man in space? Right after the Corona, maybe 5 units after it was beginning to get successful, I got pulled off to do a proposal for an E5 camera, which was originally to be a stereo version of Corona, but twice the resolution. We had one pretty much designed, and we spent 6 or 8 months getting into it. And the end date for the first flight of it stayed constant no matter what we did, which was a weird thing to do. But anyway, we went along with it, and then we began getting directions. Here's the configuration of the camera. It has to be pressurized, it has to be laid down. It's a new recovery bucket. It actually was a Mercury capsule that had to be the space and weight exactly like it. We built such a camera, and at the last minute, they said, oh no, you've got to have the center of gravity on reentry much more further forward. So we actually designed 2 screws that took a 300-pound lens assembly and moved it down the length of the thing, and so forth. And then we flew 3, and right then Mercury succeeded, and the program was canceled. That was it, because we never recovered or nothing ever worked. 35 years later, Dwayne Day interviewed me straight for 6 hours in my apartment, not too long back, and he published Spaceflight, I think, The Rising of the Phoenix or something like that, because later this thing was converted to lanyard without all these things and using the same Agena, the same recovery bucket, and so forth, with just 66-inch F5 lens. But anyway, it turns out nobody could ever figure out, and the 5 spaceflight articles don't distinguish whether it was the contractor doing it, or Air Force direction, or RW, or whom. It was just a fuzzy thing that happened, and it was what was later called MISS, Man in Space Soonest. Now, whether it was a mission race to NASA or a backup to NASA, who knows? That's.
And it was the MISS program that
Somebody
we
knows.
sort of handed over, we, the Air Force, sort of handed over to NASA that became the full-fledged Mercury program.
Yeah.
A lot of those documents have been declassified as well, and we do have a classified version of the MISS program in our archive.
One last comment about the unfortunate demise of MOL. As the Gambit mission planner and targeteer, I was accosted by OMB to run through details on how many dollars per picture Gambit took. And Gambit photography cost about 5% of what one picture from MOL had. And OMB used that in the cancellation of the MOL program.
Another fact that you probably never would have heard had you not been here today. Okay, now, I want to give Colonel Craig a chance to talk a little bit about SPADOC, how that came
Date
about.
for everybody is 4 October 1957. It was within what was called at that time the International Geophysical Year, which was really a year and a half. And the Air Force had been, and NASA and everybody had been planning on having a NASA launch during that time period. And then along came Sputnik 1. And a couple of us were down at Kirtland on the computers figuring out orbits for Sputnik 1 and getting telephone calls that the Soviets couldn't have done that. It's all a fake. And there went the satellites, and it was like, well, and that was kind of the beginning. And then somewhere along the way, the Air Force Academy wanted me to teach astro up there at the beginning of the academy. And I said, not qualified. So we started the first aerospace control squadron here in Colorado Springs. And the problem was that we wanted to provide a military capability to detect, track, identify, and catalog all man-made objects in space. And we're going to provide, the Air Force is going to provide a new NORAD with this capability under something called NORAD SPADAX, Space Detection and Tracking System. This is the late 50s. So in 1961, Thomas D. White, Chief of Staff of the Air Force, said, okay, the Air Force does want to do this. The Navy chimed up and said, no, the Navy would rather do it. They could do a better job. And that started a little brouhaha. So we have the picture of General White sitting in the surveillance chair at what became the Air Force Space Track, lecturing us on, you will have an operational space surveillance capability providing data to NORAD by 1 July of this year, period. And we made the cut. But the early days were kind of interesting. Right now we have 25, 30,000 satellites that are technically catalogable. At that time we had about 60. And it was kind of a leisurely operation, which orbital analysts would have 5 or 6 satellites they would take care of. They would provide data to sensors on a periodic basis. Now, when you're tracking satellites, it's not just one orbit determination. You've got to allow for a lot of changes, atmospheric drag, among other things. So you have to continually update the orbits so that you don't lose track of the satellites. So we had about 20 sensors worldwide taking different types of data format and whatnot. And the job of the analyst was to provide his set of sensors with data in their format so they could go out and look for the satellites, collect data, send it back to Colorado Springs, and we would update the orbits. That was a very simple way of doing things, and we wouldn't lose track of satellites. Well, on 29 June, remember we had to be operational on July. 29 June, there was a launch called, at that time, 1961 Omicron. And it was the first multiple payload launch. Transit 4A, solar radiation 3, and engine. Those are the two payloads. And the upper stage booster was an Able Star, and this was a Navy launch. So I call this the era of Navy revenge. We aced them out of supporting Colorado Springs with space surveillance. So what happened was this. They launched, we had the 3 payloads, and then all at once the sky was cluttered with satellites. And we had the first beam use up. It wasn't really technically operational, but we ended up with hundreds of targets. Now remember, we've been operating leisurely with 60. Now we had hundreds of targets. And we've got 4 big cables out, and we've got the world's largest roll of K&E graph paper, and started plotting these things up. 500 satellites. This was 80-hour weeks. And we weren't happy. And then I was talking to the Navy. You know, your Able Star blew up, what happened? And this guy confessed. He said, well, we were finished with the launch, we were cleaning off the dais, and some guy was just idly punching buttons, and the Able Star booster with its self-destruct package flew over, and the signal hit it, and it blew up. Thank you, Navy. So we went from 60 to 500, and that started the era of everything changed. Needless to say how it changed. By the way, every year we get a package in the NORAD, the Navy offering to take over space surveillance. Bill Craig was always picked, since he had the right attitude, to answer that on behalf of the Senate, which said, hell no. Time went on, and we were having fun, and we were trying to put everything into Cheyenne Mountain. Well, first, being the first on the block, you get a chance to be the first of a bunch of things. That we got the first accurate satellite reentry prediction, Sputnik 4, and it was a piece of iron manufactured in the Soviet Union in the middle of an asphalt road, smoking. The police didn't know quite what to do with it, but that was Sputnik 4. And we accurately predicted it would keep it within a few miles of where it was supposed to be, which is probably more of an accident than. And then we had some other things. The Russians, we had a lot of fun with the Russians. This is Cold War. Everybody hates everybody. The only communication we had with the Russians was through Coast Guard. This is maybe on outer space stuff, which was international, and they cooperated there. Anyway, we had the international responsibility for correctly cataloging the satellites. So we had changed the numbers instead of 1961 Omicron stuff. We ran on the Greek alphabet, but numbers never quit. And we were cataloging, well, we got orders. The Russians would not announce one of their launches unless it was a success. If it was a failure, you never heard a word. But it was a launch, so we were burning up numbers. The international community wanted to know where all the numbers went. And in this Coast Guard organization, we said, well, we calls it like we sees it, and these are launches. Satellites in orbit. Whether they work or not our problem. So after a lot of feathers and worry, the Soviets Soviets decided in the interest of international conformity, they would agree with our numbers, which was a Cold War success, I'd say. And then we had, well, in this process, and this is 1962, the Russians had launched 6 satellites to interplanetary targets, specifically Venus and Mars. And there were 3 launches, Venus, 3 launches Mars. The first 5 were dead, didn't go anywhere, we cataloged. And then the last one was a Mars launch, and it looked like it was going okay. And so we were trying to find it. I was out there using Dr. Heine's new electro-optical system down in Northern Mountain, New Mexico, which was the first electro-optical. I found an asteroid, 1627 Ivar. I didn't find Mars right away. But then all at once, the Russians, the Soviets, quit. They had been announcing the position of this hopefully successful Mars launch. They quit announcing. So got a hold of a friend at JPL, got a hold of his friend, New York Times representative in Moscow, who sprung the question on the Russians. And all at once we started getting data out to use. Of course, the satellite was dead. Then we found it, cataloged it, and that's the first time we caught an outer space object. But like I say, it's nice to be first. Now, earlier, Ray had mentioned saying something about our 437 program. As most of you know, that was our Thor launched, IRBM Thor launched anti-satellite program. So what we had was operated at Colorado Springs, was 2 launch sites at Johnston Island, and a Baker Nunn camera sitting off in an adjoining island called Sand Island for calibration. And we would launch the IRBMs at real satellites, rocket bodies and whatnot. And the idea was we had to, in order to have a viable anti-satellite system, we had to come within a lethal radius of a nuclear weapon, nominally 1 kiloton. So that gave us a good miss distance. We weren't really scared about hitting anything. And so in the process, we had, well, first we had to get software. TRW was trying. I ended up having a competition, and we did aerotronic for aerospace software, high accuracy. And what we would do was compute orbits in Colorado Springs, and then refine the orbits, refine the data, and then we had what was called a compound terminal, where we'd take these Hollerith cards, these IBM cards, 6 of them, 7 of them, and as we got better and better, we'd run these cards through the terminal, and we would send the data to Johnston Island. We had a lot of fun with that. I remember one time we were launching, and the analysts knew where everything was, but the administrators didn't. So we had tables stacked with these IBM cards all over the place. And I remember one day there was a panic because Craig went in and was searching through the piles of cards, and he reached in, pulled out a stack and said, aha, put it in the compound terminal when we launched. And that frightened everybody. We didn't see how possibly it would work, but we had, while I was there, 7 successful launches. All of them were successful, in the sense that the Thor would pass within a lethal radius of the target. And in one case, we almost hit the target, which got her everybody to take. So that was our first active anti-satellite program, and that caused the Soviets great concern. And they cranked up on their anti-satellite capability. That's another story. Now, later on, I had strategic defense R&D responsibility at the Pentagon. And I had 36 programs, everything except the AWACS. And one of those was the F-15 ASAP. And so I was constantly fighting with the system because it cost so much money. Each ASAT launch was $12 million, I think. And General Jasper Welch was on me about once a week on that thing. It cost too much money, not worth it. And we went through a lot of that drill. And I came almost got shot, went down to attack. And the F-15 was air-to-air, of course. Air-to-ground was a real add-on. And then when Craig came rolling in and briefed everybody on, we got one more, and that's ASAT. That almost killed it right there. General Russ was apoplectic. Too many missions for the F-15. So anyway, the F-15 got canceled. A lot of people will admit that. Now, in China Mountain, it went operational April '66, and in '65 and '64, we discovered that none of the planners had decided to put space in the mountain. No planning for satellites. And that was a little weird. But we ended up developing a Tiger team, and we rewrote all the 72 programs for satellites. And we ended up putting it in the mountain. It worked just fine. Kind of Delta project. So those were some of the beginnings. Now, later on, let me, time's getting short, let me jump to the end. There was a big issue about accuracy of the catalog. And of course, the more accurate you are, the better everything. So we had the standard general perturbations, low accuracy data, which was every day generate the catalog, spread it to the world. And some of us had done some studies, and the Air Force Scientific Advisory Board had gotten involved. And the bottom line was, hey, we can make the whole catalog high accuracy within the 8-hour shift time limits. So let's do it. And all at once there was a lot of political flack. The Navy rolled in and said, we'll do it. So I took the bull by the horns and briefed the NRO and the SINC, and I said, okay, we've got a plan. We're going to get the right computers, and we're going to prove that we can do it. And we're going to establish an initial operational system and do that within 6 months. Well, I got everybody's attention and got my eye up there for shooting at. But the NRO provided the computers, we got the computers, and we managed to handle the entire catalog in something like 4.5 hours. High accuracy. You know, 3, 5 to 10 times as accurate as the general perturbations catalog. No more problems with additional new computers or anything else. We already had the computer. So that's where the high accuracy catalog came from. And then I think that was a real contribution to space surveillance. I think I'll stop right there.
Well, ladies and